The call to individuation, there comes a moment in every soul's journey, a still, unsettling moment, when the outer world begins to lose its grip and something ancient within stirs, a whisper at first, a subtle unrest, a longing that cannot be named. This is the call to individuation. Individuation is not the pursuit of perfection, nor is it the performance of virtue. It is the lifelong unfolding of your truest self, the mysterious center of your being that Jung called the self. Not the ego, which clings to identity and image, but the self, the totality of who you are, including all that you know and all that you've forgotten, all that you love and all that you fear. This path is not for the faint of heart. To individuate is to leave behind the safety of consensus and to confront the unknown terrain of your own psyche. You must turn inward, not as an escape, but as an initiation, for the answers you seek will not be found in imitation or approval. The world may hand you roles, masks, and expectations, but your soul seeks authenticity. The call to individuation often comes disguised, as anxiety, as depression, as a sense of emptiness in success. It comes when the life you've built no longer fits, when your accomplishments feel hollow, when your relationships lose their color. These are not signs of failure. They are symptoms of the soul crying out for truth. You may try to silence this call. You may numb it with distraction, drown it in busyness, spiritualize it prematurely, but the self is patient. It waits, and if ignored long enough, it will find more urgent ways to speak through dreams, through loss, through breakdowns that break open. To begin this journey, you must ask, what is my essence beyond the roles I perform? What lies beneath the armor I wear? Who was I before the world told me who to be? Do not fear the descent. The dark night of the soul is not punishment, it is purification. You are being stripped of illusions so that something more enduring can emerge. You are being asked not to rise above your shadow, but to integrate it, to gather all the scattered fragments of your being and bring them into conscious unity. This path is not linear, it is spiral. You will revisit the same wounds, face the same fears, but each time with more awareness, more compassion, more strength. That is growth, that is healing, that is becoming. The call to individuation is ultimately the call to responsibility, not in the moral sense, but in the soul's sense. The ability to respond to your inner truth, to carry your own cross, to become a vessel through which the divine pattern of your life may unfold. To live this way is to live dangerously, dangerous to the ego, to conformity, to comfort, but it is also to live fully. So I ask you, will you heed the call? Will you descend into yourself not to escape the world, but to return to it with your soul intact? Will you become, finally, who you were always meant to be? This is individuation. This is your sacred task. Embrace the shadow. There is a part of you you've been taught to hide, a silent realm beneath your polished identity, where all the forbidden things lie waiting. Rage, jealousy, lust, shame, pride, fear, this is your shadow, the unconscious companion to your conscious self, not evil, not demonic, not to be exiled, but profoundly human and deeply misunderstood. The shadow is born the moment you learn that parts of you are unacceptable. As a child, when your tears were mocked, your anger punished, your wildness shamed, you buried those instincts to survive. You became what the world would accept. But the parts you buried did not die. They only went underground. There, in the unconscious, the shadow grows in silence, and the more you deny it, the more power it gains, not because it is malicious, but because it longs to be seen. What is repressed does not disappear, it returns, in projection, in sudden outbursts, in compulsions you cannot explain. In the people you judge most harshly, you will meet the reflection of your disowned self. A man who refuses to own his anger may become passive, aggressive, manipulative, or suddenly violent. A woman who suppresses her vulnerability may appear strong, but cracks under intimacy, terrified of being seen without her armor. The shadow will not stay hidden forever. If you will not face it consciously, it will show itself unconsciously through the sabotage of your relationships, your goals, your peace. But here lies a secret Jung knew well. The shadow is not just a container of darkness. It is a treasure chest of vitality. The instincts you buried include not only your wounds but your wildness, your creativity, your assertiveness, your erotic power, your truth. That which makes you whole often wears the mask of what you fear. To embrace your shadow is not to indulge it. It is to acknowledge it, to make space for it in your awareness, to say, yes, this too is me. And in that act of radical honesty, transformation begins. The energy once used to repress becomes energy reclaimed. The monster becomes a messenger. The fear becomes freedom. This is not a one-time act, but a lifelong dialogue. Every trigger, every judgment, every strong emotional reaction is an invitation. Ask yourself, what part of me is being touched? What do I see in them that I refuse to see in myself? What is asking for reintegration? The goal is not to be pure. The goal is to be whole. To walk with your shadow is to walk with your full self. You do not overcome it. You learn to listen. You do not silence it. You give it language. In doing so, you become less reactive, less easily controlled by unconscious forces. You become a vessel of integration, not fragmentation. So do not fear your shadow. Fear only the life unlived because you could not bear to look within. For when you befriend the shadow, you do not just reclaim danger. You reclaim depth, power, truth, and the raw energy of your unlived life. The unconscious as guide beneath the surface of your waking life, deeper than thought and memory, there flows a hidden current, a vast, mysterious intelligence that Jung called the unconscious. It is not a passive vault where forgotten experiences are stored, but a living, breathing. This anger is hers, this desire is his, this cruelty, this magic, this brilliance. It is not mine. And so, the lover becomes a god, the rival becomes a demon, and the world becomes a stage where your internal dramas play out. You see, projection is the psyche's attempt at resolution, but it is also avoidance. It allows you to remain blind to your own darkness, or light, the faults you cannot accept in yourself, you condemn in others. The desires you were taught to shame, you spot in the glances of strangers. The power you fear in your own hands, you assign to a parent, a leader, a beloved, but projection does not end there. You also idealize. You place your unlived dreams upon someone else's shoulders. You call them soulmate, savior, the one. You ask them to carry not only your affection, but your expectation, your redemption, your meaning. This is not love. This is a spell. Jung taught that projection makes the unconscious visible, and in this sense it is not a curse. It is a revelation. What you project reveals what you have not yet integrated. The work, then, is not to reject projection, but to reclaim it, to pull back what you have cast out, to say, that which I see in you, I must now find in me. This act, this painful and liberating withdrawal of projection, is the beginning of true relationship. You stop engaging with your fantasy and begin seeing the person not as savior, not as villain, as themselves. And in doing so, you also begin to see yourself without the filters, without the projections, with clarity. This is the path of authenticity. It is difficult. It requires you to say, yes, I am capable of what I hate. Or perhaps harder, yes, I am worthy of what I admire. But only from this truth can genuine connection emerge. Withdraw your projections. not because others do not deserve love or blame, but because you deserve to see clearly. Only then can love be real, only then can selfhood be whole. The necessity of suffering no soul awakens without first being broken. Though we long for peace, for harmony, for a life untouched by pain, the truth of transformation lies elsewhere. It lies in the shadowed valley, in the wound, in the cry no one hears but you. Suffering, though feared and misunderstood, is not a punishment. It is the fire through which the ego is stripped of illusion and the self begins to emerge. Carl Jung taught that individuation. The journey of becoming whole is not a gentle ascent, but a death and a rebirth. It is the crucifixion of the false self. The ego, built from layers of adaptation, persona, and survival strategies, must be confronted. It must dissolve for something deeper, something truer to arise. Your suffering is not meaningless. The betrayal that shattered your trust, the loss that hollowed your chest, the failure that brought you to your knees, these are not accidents of fate or evidence of your inadequacy. They are sacred initiations, calls to descend into yourself. There is wisdom in your wound, not because pain is inherently noble, but because it demands your attention. Pain brings you to the threshold of transformation. It reveals what you've hidden, what you've denied, what you've refused to grieve. It strips you of distraction, of denial, and invites you to turn inward. In this turning, the alchemy begins. You begin to realize that the suffering you tried to avoid was never your enemy. It was a messenger, and like all messengers from the unconscious, it arrives with symbols, dreams, and disruptions. It disrupts the life you built on false ground. It shows you where you have abandoned yourself, where you have lived for others' approval, where you have silenced your truth. To suffer consciously is not to wallow. It is to become aware of the deeper layers of the pain, to ask not just, why is this happening to me, but what is this trying to awaken in me? The ego fears this inquiry, for it believes it must remain in control. But the soul knows, only through surrender does the deeper self emerge. This self is not fragile, it is not reactive, it is forged in fire. It knows that grief can be a guide, that heartbreak can open the heart wider, that humiliation can lead to humility, and humility to wisdom. In ancient myths, every hero descends into the underworld. It is not an optional part of the journey. It is essential. Only through descent does one discover the hidden gold, the soul's true inheritance. So do not flee from your suffering. Sit with it, listen to it, let it teach you. For in that sacred crucible, where all you thought you were begins to dissolve, a new self is quietly forming, not a perfected one, but a whole one. A self no longer bound by fear, but shaped by truth, tempered, scarred, radiant. This is the gift of suffering when it is met with awareness, not despair, but rebirth. The archetypes within you are not only who you think you are. Beneath your personal history, your name, your roles in the world, lives something far more ancient, a psychic inheritance, a collective memory. Carl Jung called them archetypes, primordial forms, eternal patterns that shape the very fabric of your soul. You are not alone in your psyche. It is a constellation of energies, of voices, of mythic currents. When you dream, when you fall in love, when you rage, when you sacrifice, it is not only your ego at play. It is the archetypal drama unfolding through you. There is the hero who urges you to go beyond your limitations, to face dragons, to claim the treasure hidden in your deepest wound. There is the wise old man, the inner sage who whispers truths in silence, who sits at the edge of your awareness, waiting to guide you when the rational mind fails. There is the great mother, whose warmth nurtures, whose embrace soothes, whose presence reminds you of belonging, but who can also devour if misunderstood. And many more, the trickster who unsettles your plans, the anima or animus who haunts your dreams of love, the shadow who embodies what you have denied. These archetypes are not imaginary, they are psychic realities. They live in myths and stories because they live in you. When you are moved by a film, when a book touches you in ways you cannot explain, it is likely because an archetype has been stirred. You recognize something timeless in the tale because it is your tale too. But these forces, while rich with meaning, are not tame. They are powerful currents, and if you do not become conscious of them, they can possess you. The hero becomes inflated, the savior complex takes hold. The mother becomes smothering, the shadow becomes projected, turning the world into a battleground of enemies. This is the danger. When you are unconscious of the archetype, you become it, without knowing why. You are no longer acting, you are being acted through. Archetypes do not ask for your permission, but they do ask for your attention. To live consciously is to recognize the dance of these inner figures. To say, the hero is active in me today, or the shadow is at my door, not with judgment, but with awareness. This naming is not an intellectual exercise. It is an act of inner sovereignty. It allows you to work with these energies instead of being overwhelmed by them. The task is not to exile these forces, but to integrate them, to let the hero serve, not dominate, to let the mother nourish without suffocating, to let the shadow inform without destroying. For within each archetype is both light and shadow, power and peril. You are not the puppet of your unconscious. You are its caretaker, its witness, its interpreter. And when you learn the language of the archetypes, you gain access to a deeper intelligence, a way of being that is rooted not in reaction, but in timeless wisdom. This is what it means to walk the path of individuation, to become conscious of the myths moving through you, and to choose your response with grace. The repetition of patterns, the psyche, is not linear. It is cyclical, like the moon, like the tides, like the eternal turning of seasons. What has not been healed returns. What remains unconscious resurfaces, not as a memory, but as a pattern. You think it is just an argument. You think it is just your partner being difficult, or another opportunity slipping through your fingers. But pause, watch. It is the same dance with different music, the same role with a new actor. You are living in a loop, and the loop is not accidental. It is sacred instruction. When you keep meeting the same conflict, the same fear, the same disappointment, it is not because you are cursed or unlucky. It is because your soul is repeating the lesson it longs for you to learn. This is the work of the self, the organizing center of your psyche that seeks your wholeness above your comfort. It does not care if you are happy in the moment. It wants you to wake up, and so it allows repetition until recognition is born. The lover who abandons you touches the wound first carved by a parent's absence. The fear you feel when praised echoes the shame you learned for shining too brightly. The sabotage of joy whispers of an old vow, it's safer not to hope. Each pattern is not a punishment, it is a portal. An invitation to return, not with resignation, but with awareness. Ask yourself gently, what pain is this pattern replaying? What am I afraid to feel? What have I not yet faced? Do not answer too quickly. The answers lie beneath the surface, in the layers of feeling, in the half-remembered dreams, in the tightening of your chest when someone comes too close. You cannot change what you do not first acknowledge. You cannot release what you still fear, and so the pattern returns again and again, not to torment you, but to liberate you. This is psychic alchemy, the transformation of old wounds into new wisdom. The art of no longer being ruled by what once ruled you. The moment you see the pattern, truly see it, something shifts, the loop is broken, the wheel turns, the past loses its grip, not because it disappears, but because you have entered it consciously. You have walked into the story, found the child within, and said, "I see you now. You are no longer alone." This is the beginning of true freedom, not the freedom to escape, but the freedom to choose differently, to respond rather than react, to love rather than repeat, and in that choice a new future begins to form. The alchemy of love, in its true form, is not a feeling. It is a force, archetypal, eternal, fiery. It flows not just through the heart, but through the soul, touching everything it meets with the power to transform. But it is also volatile, fragile. It can be twisted by fear, distorted by projection, poisoned by wounds we do not yet see. Love that is unconscious is dangerous, for without awareness we do not love. We cling, we demand, we lose ourselves or attempt to consume the other. To love truly, you must begin not with another, but with yourself. You must descend into your own soul, confront your own shadow, and ask, "Am I ready to be seen?" Love requires you to be exposed, not just your strengths, but your uncertainties, not only your beauty, but your fears. Love calls forth the whole self, and the false self cannot withstand that light. This is why many run from real love, not because they don't want it, but because it threatens to burn away their illusions. Love is fire, it purifies. The fantasies of control, the ego's masks, the stories you tell to feel safe, all must fall away, and yet this fire does not destroy, it refines. When two people love each other not to complete, but to reflect, not to consume, but to nourish, a sacred alchemy begins. Each becomes the crucible in which the other is transformed. Your wounds rise, yes. Your fears are triggered, yes. But they are held in a container of trust. This is the miracle of conscious love. It doesn't avoid the shadow. It welcomes it. It says, "Show me your pain, and I will not run. Show me your fear, and I will not punish. Show me who you are, and I will stay." Such love is not born of fantasy. It is forged in the fire of presence. To reach this love, you must let go of the need to be perfect. You must surrender the fantasy of rescue. You must see the other not as savior, nor as enemy, but as mirror, a sacred presence sent to reveal you to yourself. This love does not complete you, it awakens you. It is not possession, but communion, not escape, but transformation, and in this, love becomes an alchemical act, a journey from illusion to intimacy, from longing to belonging, from self-deception to shared truth. Cherish it not as a fleeting passion, but as a sacred practice, for love, in its truest form, is not about finding someone to lose yourself in. It is about finding someone with whom you can finally be found. The pursuit of wholeness, not perfection, is the true aim of life. Perfection is a seduction of the ego, a rigid illusion that demands clarity where mystery belongs, order where complexity thrives. It is a spiritual neurosis that splits the psyche into acceptable and unacceptable, creating suffering beneath a polished surface. To be whole is not to be without flaw, but to be fully human, to carry contradiction without shame, to feel deeply without disowning, to suffer without turning bitter. Wholeness is not achieved by ascending to some imagined purity, but by descending into the very places you have long disavowed. It means holding both the light and the shadow, not as enemies but as necessary complements. Your compassion and your anger, your strength and your vulnerability, your brilliance and your blind spots. The deeper truth is this: the self, your true center, contains all of it. It is not fragmented. It is not ashamed. It waits for you to reclaim the pieces of your being that your ego cast out in fear. This is not a comfortable process. It will challenge every identity you've worn to belong. It will shake every mask you've used to stay safe, but it is through this sacred discomfort that you stop waging war within yourself, and in that ceasefire something extraordinary happens. You stop projecting your pain onto others. You no longer need to destroy what you love to defend what you fear. An integrated person does not need to dominate, to prove, to hide. They become a quiet vessel of presence. Their love is not performance, it is participation. Their joy is not fragile, it is grounded in truth. Their boundaries are not walls but expressions of clarity. In wholeness, you do not split yourself into categories. This is good, this is bad. This is me, this is not. You stop labeling and start listening. You become a container spacious enough to hold the opposites, to let the storm pass through you without being torn apart by it. This is individuation, not a path to becoming someone else, but to becoming fully yourself. The ego fragments, the self includes, and with each act of integration, you move closer to the center, to the place in you that is not swayed by approval or rejection, victory or defeat. And from that center, love becomes real, not idealized, not dependent, not desperate, but steady, enduring, human. You preserve what you love because you no longer fear your own darkness. You know the shadow, and it no longer controls you. It becomes an ally, a guide. This is the freedom of wholeness, not freedom from suffering, but freedom within it. The capacity to walk into the chaos of life and remain intact, to speak truth without cruelty, to hold grief without drowning, to love without needing to possess. Perfection isolates, but wholeness connects. The courage to transform, the greatest act of courage, is not to conquer the world, but to face yourself. To walk into the labyrinth of your own psyche, knowing there are no monsters, only memories, only forgotten fragments of who you were before you learned to abandon yourself. Transformation does not begin with willpower. It begins with willingness, the willingness to sit in the presence of discomfort without turning away, to feel the ache of your unloved parts and not numb them, to greet your wounds with presence, not punishment. In the labyrinth, you will find the child, tender, trusting, and terrified, who learned that love was a transaction, that silence was safer than speaking, that to be authentic was to risk exile. You will find the adolescent who muted their joy to be accepted, who armored their softness to survive. These parts of you are not broken, they are loyal. They did what they had to do to protect your soul when you didn't yet have the strength to protect it yourself. But now the conditions have changed. You are no longer that helpless child. You can rewrite the contract. You can bring them home. This is the essence of transformation. Not becoming someone else, but returning to who you truly are beneath the layers of adaptation. It is not a cosmetic change, but a soul retrieval. You will be tempted to rush, to bypass, to jump ahead to the light, but the soul has no interest in speed. It is an alchemist, not a sprinter. And every fire you have walked through, every heartbreak you've endured, has softened the ego's grip and opened space for the self to rise. There will be days when the old story returns, the voice that says, "You are not enough," the fear that tells you to shut down. Do not fight these voices, invite them to speak, but do not obey. Transformation is not erasing the past. It is becoming conscious enough not to be ruled by it. And this consciousness, this inner witnessing, is what makes you truly free. To transform is to love what you once hated in yourself, to soften toward your mistakes, to recognize that every outburst, every retreat, every silence was a survival strategy, not an act of evil, but a cry for safety. When you see this clearly, self-forgiveness becomes possible. not as a luxury, but as a necessity. You must forgive yourself again and again, not to excuse, but to release, because shame binds the psyche. But compassion, even quiet, trembling compassion, begins to unbind it. This is the sacred work, to gather the scattered pieces of your soul, to hold them in your own two hands, to say, I see you, I need you, let's begin again. And when you do this, truly do this, your life changes. Not in fireworks, not all at once, but in the slow, steady rhythm of someone who is no longer afraid of themselves. And that is the beginning of real love.